Hey everybody, welcome back to Readers of the Right. Today we've got a really fun episode that pairs with one from a couple weeks ago, where we're talking about the 5 worst starter armies. Now, there's nothing wrong with these 5 armies. They have a lot of really cool things to add, and are fantastic armies for more experienced players. And they each have a specific reason why they're not recommended as the top one. And there's a couple of these armies that honestly could be in several different categories. I gave them the best category to fit them, and we'll be discussing those in detail. But first, I want to make sure you guys like and subscribe. We've been doing a lot of cool new content lately, and I think you guys have been enjoying it. If you have, please let me know in the comments below. Or if you want me to cover anything, either reader related or Warhammer related, which has been our most popular, I'm super excited to share with you guys and build this community in a way that we'll all enjoy it. So now let's dive into this and talk about the 5 armies that you should probably stay away from as your first army. And like I said, with these armies, if you want to make these your second, third, fourth army, however you want to do it, that's fine. Once you have a little bit of experience with the game, you know how to play it, and you know how to build and paint models properly, these armies are great. I absolutely love them. There's 3 of them on this list that I think are ones that I hope to do in the future, that are really interesting to me, but I haven't had the time or chance yet. I am already on my 3rd army, and I've picked and chosen those ones to fit me personally. And I think there's at least 2 of these that are very much me. Maybe, no, there's 3. There's 3 more on there that are very much me, but I definitely don't have room for 3 more armies. That is the one curse of Warhammer. It takes up a lot of space, especially once it's built and painted and looking great. You want to hold on to them in a place where you can display them and where you can be proud of them while enjoying them on the tabletop as well. So let's dive into this. If you guys disagree with me on anything here, please let me know below. And I would love to hear your input. Let me know what armies you guys play with, if you play, or what army is interesting you. And just like I said with the best 5 starter armies, if you've got a lore reason that you want to pursue an army, do it. Enjoying the lore about an army is a great reason to start building them. You're going to enjoy it a lot more. You're going to have a lot more fun with the paint. And you're going to enjoy it on the tabletop more because it gives you more of a narrative feel. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And if that's the case with any of these armies on here, great. Go for it. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do in Warhammer. There's a lot of cool things you can learn and lore that you can deep dive on. And I'll flag it right here. We've also got a video about which is a good starter book to pair with your armies. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. And let's get into this. So the first one that everyone's going to talk about when it comes to Warhammer is which army is most expensive. And just like with the 5 best armies, I'm going to reference Warhammer podcast. They did a deep dive on this, so I don't have to, which is wonderful. And then Auspex Tactics has done this as well. They've proven to be very correct on all of their math because they put in a lot of work, so I have to give them credit for it. But between those 2 and a few other videos that I've seen, there's really 3 armies that are in this way too expensive to be your starter army. But we're going to go with the main one, and that's Adeptus Mechanicus. There is a few others that, depending on when we're talking about, will beat them out. That's the Genestealer cult and the Imperial Guard. They are both wildly expensive due to the sheer amount of models involved. Adeptus Mechanicus is not in a good place, especially currently. In Warhammer 40k, they are supposedly bringing out some rules changes here in the next few weeks. I'm hoping it fixes them, because this is one of those armies that fascinates me. I absolutely love it. And if it were more beginner player friendly, I probably would already own this army. I'm still pretty new to the tabletop. I've been playing for a little over a year on a more regular basis, so it's not a good one to start with. There's a lot of rules complications, and there's several of your units are more than $1 per point currently, which is terrible. It means that to get a 2,000 point army, there's a decent chance you're going to be paying nearly $2,000 or more to get that army on the field, depending on how you want to build it. That is not great compared to the Custodes, which you can still roughly build an army for about $500 at a full 2,000 point competitive army. To be fair, most people at home play in the 500 to 1,500 range. So with the Custodes, that's $200, maybe $250. For an AdMech, you're still going to be probably about $1,000 to get to that point. And this is where 3D printing comes in. For those of people who can't afford to buy the army outright, doing 3D printed proxies until you can may be a better option. That's what we've done to build several of our armies here, especially the ones that are more for the narrative purpose. They're armies that none of us actually heavily play, but when we're doing a narrative campaign, sometimes you just need the Imperial Guard or Demons or Drukhari, and eventually Sisters when I finally get around to printing them. Those are all armies that fit really good with narratives, or maybe someone in the play group is curious about playing, but they don't want to commit to it because they're expensive and they take a lot of time. So that may be a more viable option if you're sure you want to go with AdMech. The next is one of the most complicated armies to play. Once again, AdMech will probably be in this list. Imperial Guard will probably be here as well, depending on who you ask. But Genestealer cults tend to maybe not lead out on this, but this seems to fit them the best. They have a bunch of unique rules that are very hard to play against and are pretty hard to figure out initially. There are other factions, that Thousand Sons can be this way, but we're going to go with the Genestealer cults here as the most complicated to try and pick up. Now, this next one is a very unique one for a faction that a lot of people actually really love, but doesn't really see as much play on the tabletop because of this. And that is, it doesn't actually teach you the game. And for experienced players, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And that is the Tau. The Tau are supposedly very fun to play. I've never played them. I've played against them a few times just in game stores. But the issue is they are a very one-trick pony. They shoot. They shoot extremely well, but that's all they do. So as a new player, you never really get a chance to learn about charging, counter-charging, nuisance charging. You don't tend to deep strike very much with the Tau because most of the time you're trying to form battle lines and cordons, which is a fun philosophy, but isn't really something that teaches you the entire breadth of the game. It really only teaches you about a quarter-ish. You also don't tend to do a ton of movements, so you don't have to deal with advanced charge. You don't have to deal with a lot of advances in general, unless you're moving into position. So you're missing out on a lot of the game, and if you start out with Tau, you're going to miss things in the game that you shouldn't as a player. You're going to miss pretty obvious things, especially if you're playing an army like World Eaters, where charging is the vast majority of what they do. You're going to miss a lot of cues and chances to intercept their charge or block their charge and keep them from doing things that they want to do. And it's really going to hurt you across the board. Now, after you've got a first army and you've learned those rules, then the Tau is fantastic. I know a lot of Tau players that have picked it up as their second or third army that absolutely love it. That's great. There's no problem with picking up the Tau later. But pick up a simple army like Custodes to learn on. And then once you do that, then transition over to the Tau, once you have the basics. Next is build volume. We already kind of discussed this when we were talking about the most expensive, but there is one army that is infamous for having the sheer volume of models. And this creates a bunch of issues for buying them, building them, painting them, transporting them, and it gets really annoying during the movement phase. That's one of the big downsides to this army, is your movement phase takes forever. And you're pushing a lot of units forward that die quickly. So you feel like you're just throwing things at them, and it can be a little frustrating to play. That is the Imperial Guard, or Astra Militarum. We have a 1,000 point house army on this, and I can tell you from having to play it multiple times, it is kind of exhausting trying to keep track of all of your units, what your unit strength is, how to move them properly, how to issue commands properly. It's a lot. A lot of people, once they're experienced players, love to pick up Imperial Guard because there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with them. So, once again, it's not a never. It's just a don't start here. Once you have figured out the army and you've learned how to really utilize it, it can be very powerful and very effective at what it does. But you need that baseline experience to know what you're looking at and how to move your troops in a way that will benefit you on the game board. So those are the big 4 core reasons to stay away from an army. And this last one is fairly obvious and is literally the only reason either of these armies are on here. Or actually, there should be 3 armies on there that we've seen lately. And that is soon to be replaced. You want to be careful with how Games Workshop does cycling of armies and lists. We've seen this a little bit with some of the armies that are getting upgrades and an entire range refresh. They will quickly axe a lot of your units that you like. My first army was White Scars. I got hit pretty hard with this about 8 months after I got my army ready to go. I lost one of my major leaders. I lost a few characters. I lost one of my Terminator units. They changed the rules on my airplanes. So it can be really frustrating to spend 6 to 8 months building this army, getting it ready to go, ready to get it on tabletop. You're finally comfortable with it because you played some games, and all of a sudden you lose key components to how your unit functions. So these last armies are some that fall into this category that are very clearly on the horizon for this range refresh and wipe, and will likely cost a lot of key units. The big one that everybody's talking about right now are the Grey Knights and several units of the Blood Angels. But the Space Wolves are kind of in that same boat where they're super, super old. Their models are. And they're not sized properly to the game anymore, so they look really small. And I fully suspect that either in 10th or 11th edition, you'll see these wiped clean and started over. And I fully suspect that it will be extremely frustrating for players who start with these to really dive into Warhammer, because you'll lose your armies about as quickly as you can get them on the field. On top of that, especially with Grey Knights, it just feels weird because you're supposed to be the elite of the elite demon hunters, and you're supposed to be mostly in Terminator armor, but because the models are so old, your model in Terminator armor is shorter than my just regular Marine. And it can be a little bit jarring, pull you out of the game a little bit. This is honestly one of the armies that I'm holding off on because of this reason. I would love to get some Grey Knights and play with them and really get to know what they play like, because they're very akin to the Thousand Suns in a lot of ways. And Space Wolves would be fun to have too, mostly because I play Thousand Suns, and that would be a fun narrative. It always is. But there's still a lot to understand when it comes to these replacement cycles. We're really just starting to see it and understand it as a community. And it has been very frustrating to certain groups as it's happened. So I would just recommend being careful and staying away from those if at all possible. And if you're going into it fully aware that this is going to happen, that's fine. I understand sometimes just building them and getting them on the table is what you want to do. Great. There's no problem with that. But just be aware that this is coming. So, with all of these 5 categories of armies to stay away from when you are just starting in Warhammer 40k, we've got a lot to discuss. So make sure you hit us up in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys and learn about what you guys are starting to do as a hobby and anything cool you guys have coming. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.